We would like to welcome you to the next panel, Nurturing Innovative Minds, which is produced by the Montessori Group. For educators, the COVID-19 pandemic is a quintessential, adaptive, and transformative challenge, one for which there is no pre-configured playbook that can guide appropriate responses. Education leaders must swiftly design responses and with specific contexts in mind as the pandemic runs through its course. This conversation will explore how different educational institutions and tech platforms across the globe have handled the urgent educational needs and new learning models that are emerging. The chair for this panel is Leonor Stjepic, CEO of the Montessori Group. Before Leonor takes over, I just want to remind you on some housekeeping notes. Please stay within the 50-minute time frame, as we need at least 5 minutes for the next time to prepare and go live. And may I ask everyone to switch off their phones. If you lose connection, not to panic, just try to log in again through the same link. We have a questions and answers section where the moderator can see and take live questions to raise with all panelists. Leonor, please take the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Marco, and welcome everyone to the Athena40 Forum Montessori panel. I'd like to thank Athena40 Forum. I'd also like to thank KPMG in Croatia, who are very kindly hosting me here today. We have a full panel, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite each member of the panel to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about where they're from and what they do. So Deema, perhaps if we could start with you.
Thank you, Leonor. It's such a pleasure to be with you all. I'm Deema Bibi. I'm based in Jordan, and I manage a nonprofit organization that works for youth empowerment, mostly through education and entrepreneurship. We've been doing that for the past 20 years, and we are now running our programs in every school and in every university across the kingdom. And I'm looking forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deema. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. I'm Sarah Mintey, the CEO and founder of Developing Experts, an edtech company that started just over 5 years ago. We work with 3,600 schools in the UK and over 3,500 schools in China. So I look forward to contributing to the panel today.
Brilliant. Thank you. Anna.
Good afternoon, everyone from Dubai. Thank you, Leonor. Really excited to be part of this panel. So my name is Anna, and I've been based out of UAE for the past 10 years. And previously, I worked in Germany and UK. And my expertise lies within executive education. So currently, I'm overseeing the executive MBA recruitment for the Middle East for City University of London, as we have our campus here. As well, I'm the president of Columbia Alumnae Chapter of the UAE and the board member of the Columbia Association. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you, Anna. James.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm joining from Leeds. I'm the Centre Director of the International Montessori Institute, which is a brand new research and teaching centre at Leeds Beckett. We were formed on Maria Montessori's 150th birthday, and with thanks to the Montessori Group for helping us establish this through our partnership.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. Amira.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amira, based in London. I'm a Montessori teacher and one of the trustees on the Board of Trustees for Montessori St. Nicholas Charity. I've been a teacher for 15 years, working in Montessori nurseries and in Libya, also in a British school. I'm currently deputy of a preschool that is not actually Montessori, but we are beginning to introduce Montessori method and principles and education within our practice.
Thank you, Amira.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Radha.
Hello, good day. I'm Radha Basu. I'm based in California and Calcutta, India, sort of both places. I'm the founder and CEO of iMerit Technology Services. And we're a company that is working in AI and social entrepreneurship. Particularly, we have about 3,200 employees. 54% are women, young women, and 80% of the workforce comes from low-income backgrounds that we have skilled using AI techniques and skilled them into doing very high-tech jobs. And so it's kind of the nexus of a very young workforce, technology, and clients in a variety of different applications in medicine, geospatial, and education as well. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. Stephanie.
Thank you, Leonor. I'm excited to be here as well. I love this topic because it intersects a few of the things that I feel most deeply about. I'm a mother of two. I'm not from the education space. I am a mother of two, though my son is 4.5, my daughter's 2.5. By training, I'm a mechanical engineer and a project manager originally from the gold mining sector. But through an interesting journey, I end up co-founding and am COO of a climate risk advisory firm. I'm also an impact and sustainability advisor to early stage mentors and a mentor to entrepreneurs and startups. And I tutor on the Oxford Strategic Innovation Program focused around toolkit and practical application of innovation tools.
Fantastic, thank you. Paula.
Hello there, I'm delighted to be with you all this afternoon as well. So I am in education. I started my career in London. I was the deputy head there as well. I moved to Malaysia and I'm now a head of a large international school in Singapore. So yes, we have children from all over the world, predominantly British, from 3 to 18. So it's very varied and very fun.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, everyone. So I'm going to ask the first question to Amira, James and Paula. What is the role of the teacher in nurturing innovative minds? Amira, perhaps you could start us off on that one. Oh, we're going to have to unmute you.
Oh, we believe that children have an innate capacity to be curious, creative, driven, to learn, to explore. They're creative knowledge builders. They don't stop learning. They don't stop imagining. They don't stop thinking. They don't stop using their senses to explore their environments. And so as teachers, we need to provide that environment for them to be able to be and be active learners, agents of their own learning. And to experience the environment with their peers, with their teachers. The teachers, we believe, as Montessorians, act as guides, coaches. They nurture, they inspire children, they empower them to explore their environments and to take from them what they need. We observe, we listen, and we prepare the environment for each unique individual so that they take from it what they need.
Great, thank you. James, would you agree with that? Is that also your experience? I know you teach more older students as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously training teachers for the past 10 years, but as very much my previous experience as primary teachers. And I think what Amira said was really important. Phyllis Wallbank told or had an anecdote from Montessori herself, who said, you know, I point at this amazing thing, this beautiful thing, and everybody else says, oh, what a beautiful finger you have. And she was so so dedicated to the child and being centered on the child. So the role of the teacher really in developing that innovative individual is to be all about pointing towards the child and enabling that child. And as Amira says, creating the right environment is so key for learning. We don't have to be inside for that, but creating an environment for innovation. Anna Craft talks about teaching creatively or teaching for creativity, and for me, nurturing that innovation is all about teaching for creativity and that creative individual. So we don't necessarily have to have all the whizzy lessons in the world, but we need to be focused on the child and enabling that child to be creative within the space that we create for them.
Okay, Paula, is that your experience as well?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we're looking at curious children, putting them in enabling environments. And I think sort of open-ended resources and having loose parts, and it's all about the process, I think, that that the children go through. And I think it's sort of enabling children to develop at their own pace, but facilitating that and supporting those children that perhaps need a little bit more, perhaps guiding them towards different activities, but by creating sort of fascination traps and just exciting them and inspiring them. And I think that's a job, not just early years, but all the way through.
Great, thank you. So we hear a lot about we're in a technological age, and obviously with COVID, digital education is something that's been very much on everybody's sort of radar, and a lot of schools have had to teach Zoom lessons or Microsoft Teams lessons. Sarah and Radha, perhaps you could sort of talk a little bit about what's the role of technology in education and in nurturing new skills. Perhaps, Sarah, if you could start us off on that one. Sorry, I'm going to have to unmute you.
Thank you. Yeah, now I believe that technology has a major role to play in ensuring pupils and students develop the skills that they need to have the technology literacy to develop the problem-solving skills and the knowledge to access the knowledge they need in order to become inspired for their futures. And yet many schools don't have a long-term strategy for really thinking through how they're going to exploit the technology. Developing Experts, it has a platform, has developed a platform built on cognitive research, which is proven to have an impact on learning outcomes for children. Firstly, our technology uses stories to help support students remember what they've learned and what they're covering as a vehicle for delivery. Secondly, we look at the forgetting curve, which shows that often folk don't retain very much. In fact, after just 6 days, you remember only 10% of what you've explored. And so what we do is use the technology to enable kids to revisit content, so it has every chance of getting from their short-term working memory to their long-term working memory. And one of the things that we focus on is actually making sure that we make the connections between the classroom and the world of work, so that kids can actually make informed choices about their futures, and really trying to avoid and reduce and remove the chance element of discovering the career that they might end up going into. Belfast has the highest number of female engineers in the country, and that's because they've had 100 years of families being employed by the Port Authority, and then the parents hand those jobs down through the generations. And, you know, if you think about rail alone, 15,000 different jobs, how can you sell that as an industry to a young person and explain the complexity and the vastness and range and depth of opportunity to them? And so for us, it's about making or enabling young people and families to make informed choices. And I think that's where technology comes into its own. It can actually enable people to discover way more than through traditional methods. Yeah, I mean, there's a CBI report in 2016 that identified that teachers often don't feel confident about teaching maths and science at primary. In fact, 89% of teachers said they didn't feel confident. And so for us, it's about empowering teachers to have the knowledge to pass on and inspire and challenge young people.
Okay, thank you. Radha, what are your thoughts on technology and its role in education and in nurturing those new skills that we need and that innovation?
So I actually think that as much as we're going through a very difficult time with the pandemic, it has really brought out the role of how technology and a lot of the newer technologies can reduce the divide between different types of schools and classrooms. And particularly for us, we work with young people, not necessarily in the classroom, but youth and young women, to be able to see how they can bridge into that gap and actually deliver very high quality, very highly skilled deliverables and be connected globally. And to me, what's amazing is every time that I think, oh, this is really hard to do, the young people we work with are able to adapt, and really, in some ways, the technology motivates them to do continuous learning. So I can give you examples of how the technology, whether it's something as like Zoom that brings together classrooms. I mean, we do all of our workers, our workforce now is remote. All of the workforce used to be working from centers on March 23rd, and then everything went remote. And so we had to take 3,200 people remote. And the way that technology, whether it's using things that are like immersible devices where people really learn, immerse themselves in a particular way in something they have to learn. So let me give you an example. We are working in AI, in artificial intelligence in medicine. And most of our young people have gone through, because they come from the backgrounds they are not very skilled in the physiology, anatomy, and our ability to use these kind of immersion devices, immersion technologies, to be able to use gamification, to be able to use even things around 3D printing and distributed 3D printers, and being able to use machine learning and AI to do custom education means that they are able to, in their homes, get to learn and work on societal issues around medicine, crop layout, geospatial images, even things that they would probably never come across. An autonomous vehicle or a self-driving car may not come across for some period of time. They work with LiDAR images. They work with all kinds of technologies. So my point is that what this has done this whole year of 2020 has actually brought together and brought out the best in young people. Our centers are in many parts of Eastern India, in Bhutan, and in a part of the United States where young people don't have an access to a lot of jobs, and that is New Orleans. So we're dealing with a very diverse set of people, and it is technology that is bringing all of this together, everything from a Zoom conferencing to using AI tools, to using educational tools to be able to bring together all of these people so self-learning can happen. That's the other point I'd like to say. If you go back a lot, I mean, everybody's heard about the hole in the wall experiment, but the hole in the wall experiment is about children and their curiosity and young people's curiosity to learn. When they see a problem that they don't know about, if you give them the access and give them the ability to learn, young people become self-learners, are motivated. And that's one of the real learnings for me, having been in this whole tech industry for over 40 years. I really feel that this opportunity is unparalleled in being able to get this blended, remote, online learning, even with somebody who has a phone and is using that to be able to do English learning. So those are the two things that I would point to.
Thank you, Radha. And I think I may bring in, there's a couple of, I mean, everyone's made some really interesting points, and I will bring people in on some of the other points, but I'd like to ask another question to Stephanie and Deema and Anna. We've heard about technology, we've heard about sort of education. Outside of that, what are other skills that are needed to nurture innovative minds? What, are there skills that can be learned either as an adult, or we should be encouraging young children to learn that are outside what you would perhaps find in a school, or not in the technological field? So perhaps Deema, if I could ask you that question first.
Thank you, Leonor. Well, since I'm starting this, allow me please to address the question from a more macro perspective. So we all agree, we all realize the fact that education needs to be more relevant to the changing requirements, not only of the job market, but of life in general. Even life skills today are different. You know, recently we're talking about agility, adaptability, resilience. 10 years ago, we were not talking about these skills as part of life skills. So educators and experts the past around 5-6 years have been trying to come up with a framework, an umbrella or a descriptive setup for education, which would include all the key elements that would describe such an education system that would produce or graduate young people who are capable of succeeding in jobs that are very much relevant to the fourth industrial revolution. And they came up with the term Education 4.0. And what this Education 4.0 basically includes several elements, but let me highlight what I believe are the most important ones. So first of all, it's more resourceful. The teacher and the book are not the only sources of information, but the world is, it's very diverse sources of information, including YouTubes and MOOCs and online learning and peer-to-peer learning and role models from the business world, etc. It's also very much exploratory. It depends entirely actually on active learning. And so it's project-based, it's research-based, there's a lot of trial and error and exploration, etc. A third term is that it is individualized or even personalized. And it's actually also seamless education, meaning it doesn't have to happen in a specific time, at a specific time in a specific place. So it can take place anywhere and at the pace of the person. So it does take into consideration the individual differences and circumstances and at home, etc. In addition, it also focuses a lot on the learning skills. So it's not about, obviously, everyone has been saying that, we all know that as educators, it's not about the information itself, but it's about how do I get it? Where do I get it from? What do I make out of it? And this curiosity to get to know it and to find it, and the curiosity to keep on developing one's abilities and skills and so on and so forth. So lots of focus on lifelong learning. And of course, as the previous panelists have been mentioning, it has a lot of integration of digital technologies within education. So lots of focus on VR, AR, augmented reality, mobile technologies, cloud computing, you name it, blockchains, big data, all these fancy, nice words that today, for my generation, they're fancy and it's nice and cool to know them and just say them. But for my kids' generation, if they're not aware of all, if they don't understand all these terminologies and actually get to use them, they will not find jobs. They can't find jobs. Of course, in addition to social and emotional intelligence and skills. So talking about skills in specific, lots of focus on cognitive skills, complex problem solving, creativity, decision-making, and etc. Social skills are important, people's management, being service-oriented, emotional skills, I mentioned agility, resilience, but also empathy and kindness are important, and the digital skills are extremely important. And I would also finally add entrepreneurial skills and the financial education are also extremely important. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Deema. Anna, what are your thoughts on what are the other skills that are needed to nurture innovation?
Yes, I completely agree with Deema about curiosity and creativity playing a crucial part in developing solutions. And it's the necessary outcome of education, be it a junior, high school, or even executive education for senior people. And I think that there are two misconceptions usually, if I may start with that. First misconception is that only few of us have this ability to be creative. However, I don't think that's the case, because we all, by our DNA, we're all curious, we want to explore, it's just built in us. And the second misconception is that creativity or creative lessons is something which is extra curriculum, which is not essential. But I hope and I see that we're moving away from this, especially in the current climate, as the world is so mobile, so we have to be creative. It's a mobile economy, and as a person who is based in the Middle East, which has one of the youngest population in the world, especially if we talk about the United Arab Emirates, education and innovation is the national priority, and it's coming with a lightning speed with all the developments in these two sectors. So this brings me to understanding that it's not just about a teacher and a child or a student. It's actually about the entire ecosystem. So by that I mean it's also about parents, families, their role in creativity of their children. It's also private and governmental sector. So the entire ecosystem, I believe, needs to work together, embrace the new world, and communicate with each other to synchronize, and support this creativity of a child. And I believe that the skills that I needed to nurture, or how we can do this, as a mother of two children of a very young generation, the generation Alpha, who are born entirely with the technology, a person who works in education, so I can see it from both sides, being a mother who did the homeschooling for small children and working with senior executives, looking at their path of executive education. So with this knowledge, I believe that there are three things. First of all, I think the play, basically the freedom to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes, and a lot of time we forget about it. We see the superficial success stories, but if we let children or students know that behind the success story, there were mistakes, there were experiments made, and there was a lot of hard work involved, I think that's important. And parents, especially parents, play an important part in this process. Or let's take a simple example of Lego bricks. You don't need to have hundreds of sets. You have one set, and then perhaps from one set you can create different other things. And I have observed it with my own children, who created a rocket from a farm puzzle. So just to let them play, maybe perhaps have less toys and give them this freedom to think out of the box. In the current world where we are saturated with toys with batteries, and such enormous access to everything, perhaps limiting a little bit makes them think, oh, how can I use this one toy, Second is, I think, the passion. If we nurture the passion of a particular child or a student, perhaps reminding them that it's not always about good grade or giving always a correct answer. It's also about asking questions, asking what you're passionate about and not being afraid to actually ask, not just being focused on giving the answers, And the final, I think, thing that we can encourage is the purpose. So again, not about grades or pass or fail, but also explaining that it's not just about serving yourself, it's also about having a responsibility, a wider responsibility. In very simple terms, such as a teacher is taking care of the classroom, that's a responsibility. I am taking care of you as a mother, that's a responsibility. So what is your responsibility? And believe me, a 6-year-old can, as you know, can understand this concept if you explain it. So I think overall, to summarize, just to reinforce the idea that it's okay to make mistakes, perhaps moving a bit away from this risk-averse culture, although different cultures have different, way of handling this, and perhaps moving a little bit away from this stringent curriculum in the schools, because, if we don't try what is possible, if we don't push the boundary, how do we know that it's possible? Yeah. So giving them a challenge, the freedom, and nurture this motivation, because usually, it's all about motivation. Why do I do this? Once I think they're socially, emotionally, and physically, intellectually engaged, there is no question about motivation. And this is what most parents and educators are, usually worried about. So eventually, it's about giving them understanding that it's also extremely gratifying to invent and to be creative. Yeah.
I think, Anna, a lot of the Montessorians are nodding along in agreement with what you're saying there. So thank you for that. Stephanie, what are your thoughts? What are the other skills that are needed? I know that you talked about mentoring. What is that? I'd be quite interested to sort of see, what's the role of mentoring?
Well, that's a whole nother question, I think, but a really good one. I think on that, I think mentoring is really important. I think to have the support. I'm a female engineer from the mining sector, so I figured out very quickly that having a support structure around me was really important, really necessary. And then I felt the follow-on responsibility of creating that for other people in that space or in that same context. And now I see that with female founders and entrepreneurs in general. So I think it's having that, just what maybe an education setting can provide for really young people. As we grow up, we need to continue to have those support structures around us, and mentoring can play a huge role in that. I think in terms of skills in terms of skills for innovation, I want to tie it into kind of a bit of a framework around innovation. And my perspective is around the skills. I think we need to successfully apply innovation to some of the huge challenges we're facing. Part of the context of this is around COVID and the skills that my children and their peers will need to contribute to finding a way forward for the world through COVID, into a climate crisis, into growing wealth inequality, are vastly different from the ones that I got and have developed over time. So when we talk about innovation, we're talking about generating ideas and then understanding how those ideas can create value and then capturing that value. So we talk about generating ideas. Creativity has been mentioned, really important. Anna mentioned responsibility. And I like to tie those together. I think the creativity needs to exist inside an understanding of the challenges that are in the world, so that young people can see the whole world and not just their corner, and feel the responsibility of being an active global citizen, and then applying creativity to that and understanding what that means for them. And then when you talk about creating value, I think the definition of value is changing, and that's a good thing, I think. But we need to understand what we mean by value and for whom that value is. And I think one of the skills, and this can be taught as much as it can be learned, and I don't think it's ever finished, is the ability to have a systems view of things and to apply systems thinking when you're looking at a challenge or a problem in a context, to understand the indirect implications and the kind of interwoven nature of the world that we live in, and take a more holistic view. Systems thinking as a whole set of skills and knowledge and tools in itself. But I think that's something that I would love to see more of, and that I think young people will need to be taught and grow and learn in as they progress.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Stephanie. I've heard the words curiosity and creativity used a bit, and so I'm going to ask a question of Paula and Amira. So I know you work particularly with young children, and I know that a lot of, well, certainly from the Montessori perspective, encouraging that curiosity and that creativity is really essential. What more could be done to ensure that continues sort of post, as they go through their school system? What else happens? What else could we be doing?
Yeah, I think being curious is an innate quality that our young children have, and I think the role of the educator is to provide an environment that continues to nurture that. And I think sometimes our sort of system and our curriculum can get in the way, and I think it takes a creative practitioner to enable it all to develop and unfold. And I think I've seen it happen all the way through, actually, depending on the environment that you're in. Of course, we're looking at outcomes for children, and I think that's a significant part of what we do as well. But I really believe it's the journey with which you travel on, and you can inspire and create that curious journey, no matter how old the children are, through various different ways. So yeah, that's what I would believe, and I think adaptability as well. And I think in this current climate, I think as adults, we've had to show our adaptability and resilience. And those are the skills that we're always trying to teach the young children. And they seem to do it much more easily, I think, than perhaps we do. So I think during this period, we've actually learned quite a lot from the young people that we work with in how to lead the way. So.
Brilliant, thank you. Amira, would you agree with that? Has that been your experience as well?
I definitely agree. And I think allowing children the freedom and the time as well to explore, to be curious, to engage, and to learn about their environment, the hands-on learning, the natural real life objects, real life experiences that they have, all contribute to this this resilience that they get. I think acknowledging also the process instead of just the outcome, the effort that they've made is as important as the outcome that they get. And that way their resilience is developed in the way that, it's okay to fail. It's okay not to achieve that result that I set out to achieve, but how do I think differently? How do I, the curiosity leads them to thinking in a different way to achieve that outcome, and it's okay. And that's really important, to allow the time, the freedom and the choices, because it's through the choices that they're making that they get that resilience. That not all their choices are the correct choices, but they learn through making those mistakes and develop. So definitely.
Yeah. Thank you. We have got a question from the audience, and I will come back to it. But before we do that, I was particularly sort of struck by the conversation that we were having around soft skills and building up soft skills. And the thing that popped into my head, and this is perhaps something for Sarah and Radha to answer, is how do you teach those soft skills if you're not interacting on a physical, at a physical level? If we're having to do things, through COVID, on Zoom or things. So how do we ensure that we don't lose that ability to learn those soft skills? Perhaps Radha, if you could sort of answer that first, and then Sarah, I'd like to hear your views on that as well. Radha, you need to unmute. Sorry, we need to unmute you. There we
I
are.
was listening to a lot of the comments around agility and adaptability and things. I think two things that we've learned, and granted, we're working with young people who are 16 years and older, so who are getting into the workforce and who've had maybe 10th standard education, etc. Two things that we've learned from them, especially during this remote working and remote interactions, is that they do better, much better, when they feel that we trust them. Trust is such a critical part of bringing out creativity, innovation, inventiveness, and even entrepreneurship. So I think that is one where you say you put the problem out there and see what are the kinds of things that come out of there, out of their minds, and engaging them in it. And the second thing is we've shared a lot of examples of entrepreneurs. And when we did some surveys to find out what about entrepreneurship, what did they understand about entrepreneurship? Because remember, this is in their line of work, as they're working on technology solutions, this is happening. The thing that came out is they picked up the most is, oh, you can make lots of mistakes when you're an entrepreneur. You just have to learn what those mistakes are, admit them, and go on to fix them. So the fact that this is an iterative process, that entrepreneurship and innovation is about learning and making mistakes and picking up and moving on, is one of the skills I think that really engage them. And the last thing, something we did, but this really came through technology, we used a social wall and had people post what is their dream. We called it I Dream. I dream about iMerit and the future of iMerit and what they've dreamed, their dream period. And I tell you, my heart just, even now, a few months later, it just jolts when I say, there were, at that point, we had about 2,800 employees. We've added employees during this COVID, which is a crazy thing anyway. But 2,680 people posted their I dreams on the social wall. And all we had to do, and they were such wonderful dreams, which connected them, technology, and the company. And I think allowing people to express it and showing that you really trust and care, that they can be innovators and entrepreneurs has been, and using the technology to do that has been really important for us.
Great, thank you, Radha. Sarah, so what are your thoughts on how do we ensure that technology doesn't stop people from developing those, social skills, or does it stop people from developing those social skills and those soft skills?
Thanks, Leonor. I mean, I think it's important to remember that technology is a tool in the hands of humans, and you've got to actually ensure that the technology is all about connecting two people from one point to another point. And so it's about enabling conversations to take place online. So you get that human interaction and you get that feedback, because it's all about relationships at the end of the day and making connections emotionally. And so anything or any tech that builds towards ensuring that those outcomes are realized is one way of doing it. We actually have the contract for the rail sector to deliver their careers and skills profile. And as part of that work, what we're doing is overtly teaching the fusion skills through a variety of online activities. So they are encouraged to explore teamworking, problem solving type skills in order to make their employability or chances of employment far greater. And so for me, it's about sometimes overtly creating the space to encourage those skills to flourish. And, so in some of our lessons, what we've done is created 21st century challenge skills that enable young people to be challenged to explore a concept, whatever that is, using a certain type of skill that employers look for. So we build it in, I think, is the best way of summing up.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I'm going to one of the questions from Anne Cairns. From their academic success to their social skills and mental health, the pandemic is a crisis for today's children, and the fallout may follow them for the rest of their lives. Neither parents nor teachers were trained for that. What is your advice? James, you are both a parent and a teacher, so what are your thoughts on that?
Gosh, it's a nice big question. I think rolling back to some of the conversation that we've had about mistakes, we know that actually mistakes aren't just okay, but they're crucial for children's development and learning. So people like Carol Dweck and her growth mindset, who advocate that the power of the not yet. So I might not be able to do it now, but that's okay, because I'm in that place of not yet, but I will be able to in the future. And in the same way, Jason Mose's work in the States. He's actually mapped children's brains, and there's more neurological activity going on when a child makes a mistake than when they get the right answer. So more learning is actually happening when a child has that mistake than when they just get the right answer, which is fascinating, particularly from a Montessorian point of view, where we don't praise the correct answer, but as we've said, follow the process. So for me, there will be lots of mistakes that have happened over this lockdown. Mistakes in parenting. We might have taught them the wrong way when we've had children at home. Children will make mistakes as well. But as long as we provide opportunity for talk, relationship there, and we've had, again, the power of relationship building. And I think as we're a family of 7, and so we've been hit by the rule of 6. We've not seen anybody for months. So you're probably the biggest group of people I've actually talked to in ages that aren't. But what has hit home is the importance of those external contacts outside of home, and wherever possible, building that capital, that cultural, that social capital, going to the park, engaging with the museum online. There have been so many, like we've had Zooms in our living room as a result of this experience that we've, and the role of the expert is crucial within Montessori education. And suddenly everybody has gone online as well with their expertise and shared that with children. So there is undoubtedly an impact, but there's also an opportunity that this whole weird experience has given us. And I think there is an opportunity for capitalizing on it and rethinking some of the ways that we do things as well. I would love to have discussions about rethinking curriculum models, but that's probably another topic for another day. But yes, think about that community.
Thank you, James. There's another question from John Matthews. It's disadvantaged children who pay the greatest price here, as they will fall furthest behind and have the fewest resources available to catch up once the pandemic threat has passed. Who can help? Governments, the private sector, philanthropists? Deema, can I open that to you? Because I was quite interested to hear what was happening in Jordan, and perhaps also Anna, because I know you've spoken about what happens in UAE. So what are your thoughts, Deema?
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't want to be the one to bring the bad news, but or to focus on it. But I mean, technology is absolutely a great tool for both equality, and unfortunately, it can be a huge tool for inequality. And we've seen that when countries are not ready, when resources are not there at homes, then e-learning and online learning and technology is actually hurting many people, specifically people with disabilities. And we were seeing them in our schools. They're unable to catch up. Even women, young girls sometimes are not able to catch up simply because they have many siblings at home. And this is a scenario that is very common. I'm not just highlighting unique examples, but this is a very common example of young girls who have 5 or 6 siblings at home, probably older than them, or boys, or whatever. For whatever reason, they get the priority, and there's one mobile or one laptop, and they wait until their mom or dad is back from work so that they can connect to their classes. And by the time it gets, it's their turn, classes are over and it's late and etc. And they just miss school all the time. So unfortunately, because this was so sudden, it came so sudden when countries were not yet ready for online learning. We were not ready for hybrid or blended or e-learning or any type of learning over technology. So many people were hurt. And to be honest, I don't think this will be done anytime very soon, specifically tailoring it for people with special needs, because it's this requires lots of tailoring. Every individual with disabilities is a different has different needs and requirements. People with different disabilities require different tools and ways. So that's the backdrop of what's happening. We have run the past couple of months. We've been running focus groups, discussions with young girls and young boys, and unfortunately, I've heard many more sad stories than good stories.
Yeah, that is a shame, isn't it? I mean, I think we mustn't sort of lose sight that yes, there are some extremely vulnerable people who we need to be thinking of as well. So we're sort of running out of time here, and which is a shame because I could talk for hours. But Anna, if I can just actually perhaps ask you the third question that's come up, which is how do we accelerate this focus on creativity and focusing more on the process that sort of Amira's talked about, and Paula and James, certainly from a Montessori perspective, that's very true. How do we accelerate this in schools and traditional education settings? If I can sort of ask you to finish with that question, and then we can, unfortunately, going to have to pass on to the next panel, which is a shame. But Anna, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Leonor. I think that goes without saying that in March or April this year, overnight, every educational institution had to move to a digital platform, a digital classroom. And as I'm working for one of the oldest and largest UK universities, this change happened overnight. And it was impossible to imagine that this would happen at such institution. Because, the digital education plans for this were a thing of the next 5-10 years. And the COVID-19 situation just changed it overnight. We had to adapt. And I think education was one of the industries that was hit really hard. And back in March, when we had a lockdown here and we had to move our students completely online, both small children and executive MBA students, it was a big shock for everyone. For the teachers who still had a mindset, of more like face-to-face teaching, which was not possible. And also for children, that their parents become teachers, which was a very big shift, and there's a very thin line. You would understand as parents. So I think the hybrid model really started to work well. At least this is what we have seen in the Middle East. And to accelerate it, I guess everybody just has to understand that things cannot be the same. We're already moving forward with a really high speed. And even institutions which had very, very backward looking, let me put it this way, view on how education should be done, they really had to move overnight to a digital classroom. And I think there is no way backwards, even if lockdowns are over, even if we have vaccine, we now understand that hybrid is the way perhaps to go, especially when some countries are in lockdown, some countries have travel restrictions. Like for us, for example, our students can come here on the campus in the UAE. However, our professors from the UK cannot travel, as the institution in the UK doesn't allow them because of health issues that may occur. So we're in this kind of hybrid situation where you kind of are there in the campus, but you see your professor on the screen. And this is the way that we just have to accept. And there will be always those who don't like it. We had lots of complaints about this. We had those who were happy, who didn't want to expose themselves by coming, to face-to-face teaching. So you can't make 100% everyone happy, teachers and students. You just have to find this middle, at least for now, for the time being, to make it work. And health being, health and safety being the priority, of course.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank you very much, everyone. I mean, I think for me, the time has just kind of flown by, and I think we've had some great questions, some great contributions from everyone. I think that I would just end up by saying that what I've heard this afternoon gives me hope that we are in a difficult time. We are obviously facing something that none of us have ever faced before. We don't really know what the future is going to bring, but clearly there's, from across the world, as we've seen here in this panel, and as we're hearing today, there are people who are really working to make a difference. All of you are working to make a difference. So I want to say thank you to all of you for not just being on this panel, but for everything that you do, and please do carry on making a difference. So thank you very much for that. Thank you.